Let's dive a little bit deeper. Earlier this week, Speaker Johnson said he's going to, quote, move a standalone Israel funding bill and will separate the funding from Ukraine aid. I know on your Twitter, right next to the American flag, you have a Ukraine flag. So what are your thoughts on this?
Yeah, I'm very disturbed with where the new speaker has decided to go on Israel aid. He's moving just Israel aid with no humanitarian aid and without the package of aid for Ukraine. That's bad for at least two reasons. Number one, Israel aid has always had very strong bipartisan support here in the House of Representatives, and it's urgent. We know that because we saw the brutality that Israel suffered on October 7th. It's urgent, and what the speaker has done is said, well, I'm only going to pass this Israel aid, first of all, without the Ukraine aid, which is essential to Ukraine's ability to fight off Russia. Oh, and by the way, we're going to only pass it if you also agree to reverse one of your priorities, which was to provide the resources that the IRS needs to go after tax cheats. And so for the first time ever, a Speaker of the House is saying, well, we're going to use Israel aid as a political tool to, first of all, create a partisan issue, and secondly, to try to reverse a Democratic priority. If you open that door in the future, Israel aid and other critical emergency aids, and it's not just national aid, right? It's things like Hurricane Sandy, Hurricane Irene. Then now all of a sudden we're in a world where, yeah, we'll pass hurricane relief, but only if you agree to this policy rider. That's a terrible place to be.
Do you think right now the GOP is acting like Israel aid is more crucial than Ukraine aid? And do you agree with that, or do you think both are equally important?
Well, it's not that they're acting that way. That's what they believe, right? I think the Republicans are probably unanimous in saying that they would like to see an Israeli aid package passed, close to unanimous, whereas half of them don't think that we need to provide any aid to Ukraine. So it's not a question of urgency. It's the fact that this, what we used to think of as the party of Reagan, the man who stood up strong against the Soviet Union, has decided that, well, gosh, the Russians invading Ukraine, not our problem. Now, we could spend an awful lot of time on whether it is our problem and when it does become our problem, but it is actually pretty mind-blowing that the party of Reagan has decided that Russian invasion of Ukraine, not our problem. And so, what you said, is that what they believe? It's very clearly what they believe in terms of, where they're putting their effort and their energies.
If the GOP holds fast that Ukraine aid must not be tied to the budget or Israel aid, is there any way you would support a budget without Ukraine aid, rather?
Well, let's be clear about what they're saying about Ukraine aid. They're not linking it to the budget. It would be done separately under a supplemental piece of legislation. What they're saying, and again, this is back to the question of whether we should use this stuff as a bargaining chip, whether we should require concessions from the other side on something that I regard is as essential as aid to Ukraine when they're, under threat, when they're in a war. And what they're saying on Ukraine is, well, we'll pass Ukraine, but only if you agree with what we want to do on the U.S. border. So what they're doing is they're saying, unless we get what we want on the U.S. border, and by the way, I'm all for conversations about the U.S. border. I think we can do an awful lot more on the U.S. border. But what they're saying is we're only going to pass Ukraine aid if we fix, according to how we think it should be fixed, the U.S. border. And so, let me paint a picture for you of where this goes. There will be essential emergency stuff, every couple of months that the Congress has to handle. And when we have a Democratic majority, how are the Republicans going to feel if, we say, well, Israel aid, well, you guys got what you wanted on the IRS. Well, guess what? We want the Green New Deal in order to pass Israel aid. That is just not a path that this Congress should go down. And sadly, that's the path the Republicans are taking us down.